When I left college, I immediately started working as a genealogist. And basically, people pay me money to do research into their family history. I research the names of their ancestors, their causes of death, and any mentions of them in newspapers. I've been doing it for almost 10 years and I'm good at it. A few weeks back, a millionaire widow called me up asking for my services. Apparently, her parents had immigrated from Switzerland when she was young, but she didn't know much about them other than their names and the town that they had been born in. It's rarely necessary for me to actually travel to a country to do my work, but I knew right away that I would have to on this case. None of my usual sources had any information on the town that she had named. It was a small village high up in the Swiss Alps. Apparently none of the records had been digitized. None of my usual routes worked. Baptisms, births, death certificates, they all turned up nothing. I told my client that I would need to travel there personally, and she quickly agreed to arrange the travel for me. I landed in the country in the early afternoon, picked up my rental car and immediately set off into the mountains. I had never visited Switzerland before, but it was spectacular. Hidden valleys surrounded by sweeping mountain ranges, all connected by winding roads littered with switchbacks. My drive took me high up into the mountains. I turned around a curve and drove directly into a thick curtain of fog. Visibility immediately dropped to something like 20 feet. On the winding switchbacks, that meant that you couldn't see the start of the turn until you've already reached it. Sheer cliffs loomed on either side, so I was eager to get off the road. I was considering just pulling off to the side of the road and sleeping in my car. I was looking for a good spot when the fog cleared a little bit as I climbed the switchbacks. I rounded a curve and to my shock, I spotted a hotel sitting just off the road set into the mountain. Bright red letters covered the side reading, Hotel Belvedere. There was a small parking lot with about a dozen parking spaces across the street from the hotel. Here's a picture of the hotel. I parked my car and made my way into the hotel to see if I could wait out the fog overnight. The inside of the hotel looked old, all dyed wood and wrought iron. A man stood behind the desk in the lobby, probably in his late 60s. When I shut the door behind me, he shot a tired look in my direction. "Speak English?" I asked. "A little bit," he said. "You want room?" I nodded and he continued. "A room is 125 francs. Good?" I nodded again and pulled out the bills from my wallet. The man sighed and held up a hand. "You are only guest tonight. I am owner of the hotel here and I don't want to stay here all night. If you stay, you here alone, okay?" I was surprised at that, but I figured it would be fine. The old guy didn't want to spend all night at a desk waiting for guests who would never come. "Yeah, that'd be fine," I said. "One more thing," the man said. "If you stay, you must stay in room with door locked all night, okay?" I figured he just didn't want me messing around with his hotel, and so I agreed. He turned around and pulled out my key, an iron key that looked straight from the 1800s. "Room 7, he said. "Top floor." I headed up to my room and I walked inside. It looked out of another century, sporting a sink and glasses inside the room. It also had a balcony with an amazing view of the windy roads that I had driven up. Some of the fog had cleared, so I was able to take this picture. After the sunset, I was getting pretty antsy. My body still wasn't ready to fall asleep because of the jet lag, So the hours passed by and soon it was a little past midnight. I lay in bed just staring at the ceiling. There was no cell service and of course no Wi-Fi. I had seen the owner drive his own car down the road, so I knew that I was alone in the hotel. So I did what anyone would do in my situation. I explored the hotel. The place was old, like I said. It also had all the strange personalizations that I had grown accustomed to in Europe. I walked across the hall to the room across from mine, and I tried the door. It opened easily. The inside had clearly not been cleaned for years. A layer of dust covered every surface and spiderwebs decorated the corners of the room. I was using my phone's light to inspect the different surfaces, and its reflection glittered in the webs. I walked up to the window and rubbed away a bit of the dust, peering through it. This side of the hotel would face up the mountain instead of down the valley like my room did. A full moon had risen, so it was easy to see the 30 figures standing on the road above the hotel looking down at me. They were spaced evenly and each one was carrying a candle. I froze trying to get a better look. Each of the figures stood motionless, all staring down at the hotel. I couldn't see their eyes, but it was clear from their body language that they were watching me. Most only held candles, but I realized with a sinking sensation that some of them held scythes or other metal implements in their hands. I fumbled with my phone to turn off the light, and the room fell back into darkness. The figures on the road turned and began walking down the road towards the hotel. I scrambled back from the window and ran back to my room, locking the door behind me. I ran through possibilities in my head. Was this some Swiss tradition? That didn't fit. Well, what about the size? I checked my phone again and saw the numbers 1:05 a.m. blinking back at me. Maybe they would just pass by the hotel and head towards the village. Maybe they'd. An enormous bang rang out through the hotel as the front door opened. My mouth was dry as I scanned the room for a potential weapon. A heavy glass cup beside the sink was all that I could see. I hefted it in my hand and backed up from my door, preparing to throw. A dozen footsteps rang out down the corridor, stopping just outside of my room. The doorknob turned and several fists hit the door, but still the lock held. I turned back to my balcony and I ran out onto it. I tried to remain silent as I scrambled up onto the railing and jumped onto the balcony of the next room over. My feet hit the metal just as the wood from the room's door cracked and splintered from an impact. I heard footsteps in my room, the sound of my bed being flipped over, the dull ripping as they tore apart my backpack. The entire time I didn't hear a single word spoken by any of them. I waited for hours on the other room's balcony, hoping that they wouldn't step out onto mine. I heard the last of them leave and then I waited more. I waited until the sky lit with the rising sun, and only then did I climb back to my room. It had been ransacked. My clothes had been torn apart and my laptop was broken in two. I made my way down the stairs to my car. Luckily, I had grabbed my car keys before leaving the room, and I drove away from there for hours and hours. When I finally reached the city, I did some research. The website that I found said that Hotel Belvedere had been closed for years.